Ma'am, step out of the vehicle. You people need to learn your place. The words hit like a slap. Elisa Monroe blinked through the rain-streaked windshield, her grip on the steering wheel turning white. Her heart pounded not in fear, but fury. I said step out, the officer barked again. Hand resting near his holster dot, she inhaled slowly. Calm was armor. I need to know the reason for this stop, she replied evenly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her spine. You match a description, he said, eyes scanning her face like she didn't belong in the luxury sedan she sat in. Black female, expensive car, suspicious route. Elisa turned the engine off. I'm a state attorney. License and registration now. The street buzzed with tension. A siren echoed faintly in the distance. Pedestrians paused, watching the scene unfold dot as she reached into her glove box. Careful and slow, the officer leaned in closer. You've got quite the attitude, ma'am. Are you always confrontational with law enforcement? She met his gaze. Only when law enforcement forgets the law, he smirked. Out of the car. She stepped into the rain dot, and into the storm dot. Officer Rourke circled the vehicle like a predator. Whose car is this? He asked, scanning the documents she handed over. Your husband's? No, Elisa said. It's mine. He squinted at her credentials. Lawyer, huh? Lawyers don't usually drive this nice. She folded her arms. I worked for. He held her, ID up to the drizzle, like the rain might reveal a lie. Got any other form of identification? You're holding my bar ID and my government badge. Anything else? Elisa bit down on her frustration. No. Rourke stepped closer, lowering his voice. You always this combative? I'm answering your questions. You're being difficult. No, she said. I'm being careful. The air grew heavier as another officer arrived, but stood back. A bystander pulled out a phone. Rourke noticed and adjusted his posture, his tone sharpened. Stepped to the front of the vehicle. For what purpose? Because I said so. Elisa glanced around. Eyes were on her now, and every one of them waited to see what would happen next. Empty your purse on the hood. Elisa blinked. Excuse me? You heard me. Contents. On the hood. Now. The crowd murmured. Someone gasped. Dot. She opened her purse slowly. Inside. Lipstick, inhaler, notepad, law journal, a photo of her and her sister from graduation. One by one, she placed them on the cold metal. The rain pooling beneath. Dot. Her hand trembled. Not from weakness, but restraint. What's this? He asked, pointing to a tiny keyring with a USB drive. A data stick. What kind of data? Legal research. He eyed her. You always carry this much junk? She didn't respond. He tapped her ID with his pen. Must be hard juggling law books and attitude. A teenage girl near the sidewalk held up her phone, silently recording. Her eyes were wide, scared. Not for herself, but for Elisa. Don't talk back. Don't move. Don't breathe wrong. Elisa could hear her mother's warnings in her head. You're black in public. That's the crime. She forced herself to breathe, to stay still, to not give them what they wanted. She didn't know the girl filming would be the reason the world saw this moment. But she knew this. Dignity was being stripped deliberately, methodically, publicly. I'd like to speak to your supervisor, Elisa said calmly. Rourke chuckled. You people are always pulling that card. Her jaw clenched. I said, she repeated, call your supervisor. He leaned in, his voice low and full of venom. I don't take orders from you people. Gasps cut through the drizzle. A white man near the edge of the crowd shifted uncomfortably. A woman whispered, Did he just... The teenage girl at the phone stepped forward. She didn't do anything, Rourke turned. Step back. Another officer gestured vaguely, but did nothing. The silence from law enforcement was louder than the sirens. Elisa stood still, rain soaking into her blazer. Her voice was gone, but her eyes burned. She refused to flinch, to shrink, to give him power. Her mind replayed the slur over and over. She had fought her entire life for a seat at the table. Now someone in uniform tried to shove her back to the floor. He turned away, smug and victorious, expecting her silence. But Elisa didn't move, didn't cry, didn't beg. Instead, she looked straight at him. No fear, no apology. "You have no idea who I am," she said, her voice even but sharp as glass. He paused. For a moment, the badge didn't protect him. The rain fell harder, and in that second, just one heartbeat long, the balance began to shift. Wasn't pleading for justice, she was becoming it, cut to black. "Read it again," her mother said, peeling potatoes over the sink. Elisa sat cross-legged on the torn couch, reading out loud from a civics textbook borrowed from school. The power had gone out hours earlier, but the candle on the table burned steady. "You will not be erased in this world," her mother said softly, almost to herself. Elisa remembered that line more than any lesson in school. It stayed with her. Through nights where sirens drowned her thoughts, through mornings when her shoes were too tight and her dreams too big. She didn't grow up with much, but she grew up with purpose. Her mother didn't just raise a daughter. She raised a fighter. The Ivy League campus was quiet, trimmed, perfect. But perfection had edges. "You play something?" A classmate had asked her, pointing at her duffel bag. "No, I'm here for law." "Oh, I thought maybe." "Track?" It wasn't the first comment, or the last. A professor once said she was impressive considering. Another asked if she could tone down her delivery during debate, saying it came off as hostile. Elisa smiled through it all. Not because she agreed, but because survival in those rooms meant swallowing offense like medicine bitter. Daily, necessary. She didn't go into law for prestige. She did it because kids like her deserved more than overcrowded schools and broken textbooks. Every night, she revised her speech to the state committee, practiced in the mirror, rewrote her opening line 100 times. Equity isn't charity. It's justice overdue. She wasn't trying to climb the ladder. She was trying to rebuild it for those still at the bottom. Her vision was simple: reform education from within. And one day soon run for Senate. Elisa wasn't just showing up. She was building something no one could take away. "You're so articulate." That phrase always came after she said something smart, something sharp, something that made the room shift. In meetings, she was often interrupted. Her ideas repeated back to her, credited to someone else. "You're intimidating," they'd say. "Try softening your tone." But Elisa knew what that really meant. Stop being excellent. Be small enough to forget. She didn't scream, didn't snap. She just kept working. And each time, a piece of her peeled away like paint on a building too long neglected by those who pretended to care. People called her polished, composed, professional. They didn't see the grip marks on her coffee cup after every hearing, or how often she cried in parking garages, out of sight. They didn't hear the silence she swallowed after every dig, every dismissal. She smiled because she had to, because for women like her, rage came with consequences. But lately, the smile felt heavy. She knew the cost of anger. But what was the cost of silence? And how much longer could she afford to pay it? "Excuse me, can I help you?" The voice came from behind. Elisa turned, notebook in hand, to find Officer Rourke blocking her path just outside the school. "I'm with the state board," she said, lifting her badge slightly. "Here for a facilities inspection." He didn't look at the ID, just scanned her blazer and heels, eyes narrowing. "Dressed a little fancy for this neighborhood, don't you think?" Elisa didn't flinch. I dress professionally wherever I go. He took a step closer. God-eyed? Something more official? She handed it over. He studied it like it might dissolve in the rain. What exactly does a state liaison do, Ms. Monroe? I advocate for underserved districts. We're assessing building compliance. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Lots of folks walking around here saying they're helping. She tucked her ID back. Unless I'm being detained, I have work to do. He lingered a moment too long before stepping aside. Just doing my job. Elisa walked away, but the chills stayed. With her, that wasn't a stop. It was a warning. After the inspection, a group of teens leaned on the fence by the schoolyard. One of them, no older than 16, nodded toward the squad car pulling off. He messes with us all the time, the boy muttered. Rourke, pat-downs, backpack checks, says we fit the description. Another added, called me a future inmate once, for walking home from tutoring. Elisa's stomach turned. She looked at them tall, bright-eyed, alert but guarded. They reminded her of the boys from her block growing up. Smart, boxed in, already judged. You ever report it? They laughed quietly. Who would believe us? She didn't have an answer. But inside, something was shifting. Their stories weren't outliers. They were proof. That morning, as Elisa merged onto the main road toward the Capitol, she spotted it, the same patrol car, 2 lanes back, following for 3 turns now. She adjusted her mirror. Coincidence. She whispered to herself, maybe. But Rourke's face in the rearview wasn't casual. It was calculated. At the next light, her breath caught. No blinking body cam light. Just a stone face behind a badge. The anxiety wasn't new. But this felt different. She clutched the wheel tighter, keeping her eyes ahead. His cruiser stayed close, turning when she turned, slowing when she did. This wasn't law enforcement. It was a pursuit. When the flashing lights finally appeared, she pulled over calmly. He strolled to her window with the kind of confidence that came from knowing no one would question him. Well, he said. Funny seeing you again. You're awfully confident for someone who can't even signal properly. She kept her tone even. I used my signal. What's the reason for the stop? He ignored the question. Mind if I ask what your real job is? State badge and all, never seen one of those before. I advocate for education reform. He leaned in. Didn't expect that vocabulary. You're very articulate. Elisa stared forward. Is that supposed to be a compliment? No need to be defensive. Just making conversation. But she knew better. This wasn't about a signal. It never was. Later that week, she filed everything. Detailed timeline. Incident report. Photos. She called internal affairs. Sent emails. To the precinct. Nothing. Days passed. Then the reply came, we found no evidence of misconduct. Body cam malfunctioned. No dashboard footage. No witness statements filed. She sat at her desk, reading the words again. And again, they hadn't just ignored her. They erased her. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure of what else to type. The system didn't just fail her. That it protected him. And in that moment, she understood this wasn't a crack in justice. It was the design. She didn't do anything. The shout cracked through the noise, raw, young, terrified. A teenage boy on the curb, fists clenched, rain soaking his hoodie. His voice broke, but he didn't back down. Officer Rourke barely looked. At him, back off or you'll join her. Elisa stood frozen beside her car, palms raised just inches from her sides. She could hear murmurs building, cell phones clicking into record mode, the subtle buzz of a crowd, unsure whether to help or stay invisible. Someone gasped when Rourke stepped forward. Another voice said, "Is this being filmed?" The answer, came in silence, arms lifted with phones high, lenses catching every breath, every threat, every second. Rourke's voice boomed over it all. Get your hands on the hood now. Elisa stared at him, her voice just like her breath held hostage inside her chest. Around her, sirens faded. Only the rain remained. At that moment, she knew this wasn't about a ticket. It was about control. And he had chosen this spot, this hour, this woman for a reason. You think being a lawyer makes you special? Rourke asked, his tone dripping with mockery. Elisa didn't answer. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was calculation. He stepped closer, smirk deepening. Maybe Michelle Obama taught you how to act like a lady, but not how to follow the law. Time stopped. Gasps shot through the crowd. Someone cursed under their breath. A woman across the street whispered, "Oh my God, did he really just say that?" Elisa's eyes didn't blink. Her fingers twitched. Slightly at her side, nails digging into her palm. That name weaponized. Not as inspiration, but as an insult. He didn't say it out of ignorance. He said to cut it, to mock her intelligence, her confidence, her place. She felt her throat tighten, not from fear but fury. But even in that fury, she stayed still, because history taught her that raising your voice got you silenced. Rourke smiled like he'd won. He hadn't seen the cameras. He hadn't seen the shift in the crowd. He thought he was the only one who mattered. But this time, eyes were watching. Yo. This is going viral, someone whispered behind the camera lens. A girl, maybe 16, streamed the moment live, her hand barely steady. She didn't speak, just filmed. People around her started commenting in real time, sharing clips, adding captions. Screens lit up with hashtags. Hashtag Elisa Monroe. Hashtag we see you. Hashtag know her name. Someone in the crowd said, tag the NAACP. Tag the press. What had started as a confrontation was now a broadcast. The power didn't belong to the badge anymore. It belonged to every phone capturing the truth. Elisa heard the clicks, saw the cameras, but didn't react. She couldn't afford to. But deep down, she knew if history was going to repeat itself, at least this time, it would leave a record. Turn around, Rourke ordered. Elisa didn't move. No, she turned, yanked her wrists behind her back, and snapped the cuffs too tight. Her body jolted slightly as cold metal bit into her skin. Hey! Someone shouted from the crowd. That's excessive. Rourke ignored them. Her state badge slipped from her blazer pocket and landed in a puddle face down. No one picked it up. What's she even being arrested for? Another voice asked. No reply. Her law journal sat on the hood of her car. Pages. Wet, warped, forgotten. Elisa didn't struggle, didn't scream. But her chest rose and fell faster now. Her mind screamed louder than her mouth ever could. I've spent my life defending the law, and now I'm drowning in it. The cuffs weren't just metal. They were betrayed. Proof that being qualified didn't mean being safe. He pushed her toward the squad car, ignoring the rising voices. You're making a mistake, she said quietly. He laughed. No, I'm making an example. The back door slammed. At that moment, Elisa stopped being a lawyer in the eyes of the system. She became a target. Hours passed. Fluorescent lights buzzed above her. Her jacket was gone. Her hair clung to her skin. Her requests had been met with shrugs. Can I speak to a supervisor? She asked a second time. No answer. The woman at the front desk avoided her gaze, took her phone, logged her name with indifference. Elisa sat alone in a plastic chair in holding, staring at a chipped tile on the wall. No one explained anything. No updates. No charges. No voice to respond to hers. It wasn't the cold that made her shiver. It was the quiet. She watched the clock. It ticked like a judge. No lawyer would come for her. because she was the lawyer. And still, none of it mattered. The bathroom mirror didn't lie. Her lipstick was gone, foundation streaked, eyes red, collar damp. She looked down and up again. Who is this? She didn't recognize the reflection. This wasn't how she saw herself: controlled, composed, unstoppable. But now, she looked defeated. And that realization broke her more than the arrest. Not because she was weak, but because she had been forced to carry strength like armor for too long. She leaned on the sink. Breath. And reminded herself, you are not what they tried to make you feel. But even saying it in her mind didn't stop the tears. Back in the waiting area, her phone buzzed. Finally returned. No apology, no explanation. Just silence. She scrolled through missed calls, texts, breaking headlines. Her hands shook as she tapped the contact list. There it was. Office of Michelle Obama. She hesitated, then typed. It happened to me. 4 words. She didn't explain, didn't justify. She just hit send. And for the first time in hours, her hands stopped trembling. The moment didn't feel like a cry for help. It felt like a fuse being lit. She was my mentee. Now she's my mirror. Michelle Obama's voice was steady, but her eyes told another story. The podium shook beneath her hand. Flashes from the press pit clicked like gunfire. She scanned the room before returning to the prepared statement on the page. Then she looked up again. This time, she didn't read. I remember Alyssa Monroe, she said. A freshman who used to sit in the front row and never raised her hand until the end when the questions hit harder. The room leaned in. She wasn't loud. She didn't demand space. She earned it. And now the world saw what happens when a black woman claims the space she deserves. Reporters stopped typing. Some listened with jaws tight, others with eyes wide. You can call her defiant. Michelle continued, her voice cracking just slightly. I call her dignified. That line was clipped into sound bites. Within minutes. Social feeds lit up. News. Stations broadcast it in prime time. She closed the speech with a final look to the lens. To every young girl who saw herself in that moment, know this: you are not alone. And we will not be quiet. The applause erupted before she stepped away. The clip of Alyssa's arrest hit 5 million views before midnight. A celebrity tweeted, if they can do this to her, they can do it to any of us. Hashtag I am Alyssa. Within hours, influencers, activists, and educators joined in. Memes, artwork, marches organized through group chats, protest signs printed overnight. News anchors played the footage on loop. Alyssa's badge falling into a puddle. Her silence. Rourke's sneer. The cuffs. Know her name trended globally. Meanwhile, Alyssa sat on the edge of her couch, phone in hand, watching the storm unfold through a cracked screen. Her inbox was flooded, her voicemail full. People she hadn't heard from in years were calling, messaging, tagging her. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a video of a little black girl in a school hallway, proudly holding a handmade sign. Future lawyer. Hashtag Alyssa taught me. Alyssa didn't cry. Not yet, but she finally exhaled. For the first time in days, she wasn't replaying the arrest in her head. Now, she was watching a movement take shape, and it had her name on it. The body cam footage surfaced 2 days later. Ganache. Anonymous email landed in the inbox of a local journalist. A private Dropbox link, a timestamp, and 1 sentence. This footage was never meant to be seen. The video showed Rourke muting his mic, angling the camera away, and disabling the recording right before Alyssa's arrest. It also included an internal memo instructing officers on navigating gray zones during escalated stops. A whistleblower from the department came forward anonymously, confirming it all. He's done this before, we all knew. The leak spread like wildfire. Pundits who had once remained quiet were now demanding answers. Hashtags were replaced with headlines. Cable. News panels debated the chain of command, the loopholes in police protocol. The culture of silence. It was no longer about a single officer. It was about the system that trained him to act that way and trusted he'd get away with it. And the public wasn't buying excuses anymore. Then the stories started coming. A grocery store manager posted about being detained by Rourke while locking up late. A young teacher described being pulled over, slammed against her car, and told to calm down when she asked why. A mother came forward with her son, now 15, had been frisked on the steps of his school at 13. None of them had filed reports. Why would we? The teacher said in an interview. We knew nothing would happen. But now? Now they were believed. Now, Alyssa's name gave their stories weight. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about everyone like her. And the more voices joined in, the harder it became for anyone to pretend this was isolated. What began as one woman's nightmare had become a collective memory. And the country was finally paying attention. Rourke tried to save face. Standing beside his attorney, he read from a folded sheet of paper. I deeply regret any actions that were misinterpreted. But the press wasn't having it. Why did you disable your camera? What about the whistleblower statement? Do you deny the other allegations? He faltered, sweated, stumbled over answers. The press conference was cut short. That night, reporters camped outside his home. Protesters stood silently across the street, holding signs that simply read, Alyssa. He closed his blinds, but the world had already seen everything. The badge that once gave him authority now made him a target, and no PR script could undo what the footage showed. The department announced it publicly. Officer Rourke was suspended. Without pay pending full investigation. Internal Affairs launched an audit into every complaint tied to his badge number. Old cases reopened. Settlement files reviewed. Names and dates cross-checked. Community boards demanded oversight. City council members introduced emergency legislation to increase accountability for police misconduct. This wasn't just about punishment. It was about proof. Proof that when the truth is exposed and pressure applied, the system, however reluctant, can be forced to bend. And though Alyssa hadn't spoken publicly yet, her silence said everything. The reckoning had started, and it wouldn't end quietly. Do you have anything to say to the public, Officer Rourke? He didn't respond. Surrounded by a swarm of cameras, he exited the courthouse in silence. Reporters shouted. Protesters stood behind barricades, holding signs that read accountability is not revenge and protect, not target. Moments later, the statement came. Fired without benefits, facing federal charges for civil rights violations. The headlines were ruthless. Rourke isn't an outlier. He's a blueprint. Badge and bias, when power protects itself. In every photo, Rourke looked smaller. Not because of the lens, but because he had no shield left. On a courtroom bench, the badge he once wore sat beside a plastic evidence bag, unclaimed, unwanted, unmissed. What once gave him unchecked authority had become proof of how dangerous silence in uniform could be. Alyssa adjusted her blazer in the mirror, the same one she'd worn the day she was pulled over. The difference? Now, she chose to wear it. No cuffs, no orders, no fear. Outside the legislative chamber, applause rolled like thunder as she stepped into view. Lawmakers turned. The crowd watching from the plaza below erupted. Alyssa didn't pause. She stood at the podium, looked the same lawmakers in the eye, and began. This isn't a policy pitch. This is personal. She laid out her reform proposal with the same precision she had always carried. But this time, they truly listened. Equity isn't optional. It's overdue. They didn't just clap, they stood. The Education Committee voted unanimously to advance the bill. Outside, school children held banners. Alyssa for Senate. She smiled, not at the prospect of power, but the promise of progress. She wasn't just returning to the scene of her humiliation. She was rewriting its meaning. Weeks later, schools introduced mandatory anti-bias training. Teacher evaluations added racial equity metrics. Police departments in 3 states adopted new accountability protocols, modeled after Alyssa's advocacy. Town halls formed advisory boards led by community members. Parents demanded inclusive curricula. Public defenders quoted Alyssa's name. In civil rights cases in classrooms across the country, kids stood for morning pledges, then followed with, "And justice for all like Alyssa Monroe." She had become more than a headline. She was now a lesson. A reminder that representation wasn't symbolic. It was structural. She stood at the Capitol steps, phone buzzing in her pocket, messages from strangers, supporters, survivors. She didn't answer yet. She looked out, breathed in, and knew this wasn't the end of her story. They tried to silence her in the street. The headline would later read. Instead, they gave her a microphone. Injustice thrives in silence but stories. Make it visible. Have you ever witnessed or experienced something like this? Drop your story in the comments. We're listening, because your voice could be the spark for someone else's courage. If this story moved you, don't just feel it, share it. Post it. Tag someone. Start a conversation. Every view, every share, every voice speaking out chips away at the silence that protects injustice. These stories matter, and so do the people behind them. Subscribe now for more truth-based fiction that challenges power, uplifts community voices, and demands accountability. Let's keep the movement alive together.